They stood in the dark stone corridor, the cold biting through layers of fur and wool. Catelyn Stark's voice was low, but every word carried weight. You are not just Robb anymore. You are the king in the north. You must think like one. Robb turned away, running a hand through his windswept hair. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, and somewhere deep behind them, a war raged that wasn't fought on any battlefield. He had just returned from meeting Talisa Magia. Her smile still haunted his mind, and her touch soft and honest offered a warmth he hadn't known since grey wind had howled beside his father's dead body. I care for her mother, he finally said. Catelyn stepped closer, her voice hardening. And what of the phrase? You gave Lord Walder your word. It may be old and rotting, but the man remembers every promise made to him, especially by a Stark. Break it, and we lose not just allies, but respect, fear, trust. Robb's jaw clenched. Do you want me to marry a girl I've never met? For the sake of alliance? Yes, she said, without hesitation, because that is what kings do. Silence stretched between them. Robb looked away, his pride bruised. But in that stillness, something shifted in him. The stubborn boy who had watched his father lose his head in King's Landing began to fade. A man was growing behind those blue eyes, one hardened by grief, war, and the unbearable weight of command. I will keep my word, he said at last. That one decision born of Catelyn's hard counsel changed everything. They sent ravens to the twins. The Frey daughter, Roslin, would be honoured to wed the king in the north. The alliance was back on. Walder Frey's tone remained bitter and mocking in his letters, but he agreed. Robb's army would pass through Frey lands with safe escort, and Roslin would be wed to the king with all the ceremony Lord Walder could. Muster Talisa was devastated when she heard, but she understood. You are not mine, she whispered, tears in her eyes. You never were. You belong to the north. Robb didn't argue. He just kissed her hand and walked away. The wedding at the twins was tense but uneventful. Roslin was quiet and sweet-faced, trembling with fear as she took her vows. Robb, cold and unreadable, said the words like a soldier. Taking an oath, there was no music, no laughter, but there was no betrayal either. Walder Frey never got the insult he was waiting for. Instead, he got what he feared most, a king in the north who knew how to play the game. After the wedding feast, Robb held a private war council with his bannermen. Catelyn sat beside him, her presence silent but commanding. We move south, Robb said, but not like fools. We take Harrenhal first. If Tywin Lannister wants to send reinforcements to King's Landing, let him do it through burning ash. Why not strike at the capital? Great John Umber asked. The Lannisters are weak. The boy king barely has his crown on straight. Robb looked at the old map before them, because every army that rushes to the capital dies in its shadow. Stannis proved that. We'd choke them, first cut their supply lines, take their strongholds, turn their allies. When we get to the gates of King's Landing, there won't be anyone left to open them. The men nodded, slowly. This wasn't the rash boy they followed. From Winterfell, this was something else, something dangerous. And so it began. While word of the Stark Frey wedding spread, rumours followed close behind. That the king in the north had no heart, that he gave up love for power, that Catelyn Stark now ruled from the shadows. The south didn't know what to make of it. Robb Stark was supposed to die at the twins, but he didn't. No musicians turned. Swords on the guests, no crossbows hidden in balconies, no slaughter in the name of a slighted Frey. Instead, Lord Walder watched from his high table as the young wolf kissed his daughter's hand, raised a toast to the Riverlands, and left with an army that looked sharper, stronger and more ruthless than ever. And as the Starks disappeared into the morning fog, Walder Frey sat in silence, for once unsure of what cards he actually held. The march south was not swift, was calculated. Robb's army moved like a great steel serpent, devouring villages, held by Lannister men, securing roads, and leaving behind garrisons that bore the direwolf sigil. No mercy was given to those who resisted. The young wolf was no longer playing a nobleman's war. He was playing the Game of Thrones, and this time he wasn't planning on losing. At Harrenhal, the prize was easy to claim. The castle, massive and broken from dragonfire centuries ago, stood nearly abandoned. Gregor Clegane had already left, dragging his men to reinforce Tywin's command elsewhere. Only a few terrified servants and battered prisoners remained behind. The scent of smoke and blood still lingered in the scorched hallways. Robb walked through the ruined stronghold with grey wind at his side and a fire in his chest. "This is where Tywin Lannister plays butcher and king," he said to his mother, his voice echoing through the empty stone halls. "Let's see how well he fares when he's hunted." Catelyn didn't smile. "Just don't forget who you are, Robb. Even hunters can become beasts." Robb nodded, but he didn't speak. There was too much fury bottled up inside him. His father's death still bled into every decision he made. But now, for the first time, his wrath was cold, not impulsive. From Harrenhal he sent ravens, one to Bowen Greyjoy, whose betrayal still stung like fresh steel. But Robb offered him something the Ironborn couldn't resist: legitimacy. "Hold the western coasts, raid the Lannister ports, and I will name you king of the Iron Islands. Cross me again, and I will salt your bones." Another raven went to Dorne, to Prince Doran Martell, hidden and cautious in the shadows of Sunspear. Robb's letter offered an alliance built on revenge. You lost a sister, I lost a father. The Lannisters mocked both. Stand with me, and we'll make sure the lions never roar again. But the most dangerous move came next. Robb turned to Roose Bolton and said, "You'll ride for the neck. Take half your men, secure Moat Cailin, and fortify the path to the north. No one passes without our word, not Frey, not Lannister, not even gods." Roose, cold-eyed and careful, nodded once, but Catelyn watched him like a hawk. She never trusted the man with leech-white skin and a voice like poison. Yet Robb saw value in his cruelty. "Do not fail me," Robb warned. "I never do, Your Grace," Bolton replied, with a bow just a little too deep. Winterfell was still under Greyjoy control, but that was not Robb's next target. He left it for later, understanding what others could not. Vengeance is best served when it feeds strategy. The north could wait, but the south was bleeding, and the Starks were sharpening their teeth. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, rumors raced faster than truth. Cersei Lannister sat in her chambers, wineglass shaking in her hand. "Why is he still alive?" she hissed at Tyrion. The imp raised a brow. "Because, dear sister, your pet phrase failed. Because you underestimated a Stark again." "Then we crush them now," she snapped. Tyrion leaned back. "You'd crush wind and shadow. He's not playing a boy's war anymore. Robb is fighting like Tywin. And you know what frightens me most?" He took a long drink. "He might be better at it." And far to the east, Stark heard the whispers. She was still trapped in a gilded cage, still being paraded like a grieving dove. But when she heard her brother had married the Frey girl, had taken Harrenhal and had sent ravens to dawn. Something inside her shifted. Hope. Real, dangerous hope. At the Twins, Lord Walder Frey sat alone, chewing meat from his teeth and brooding over the one wedding in his life that had not ended in blood. His sons grumbled, his daughters sulked. The insult had never come, but the wound remained. "We should have killed them all," he muttered. But even he wasn't foolish enough to challenge a Stark army that still had teeth. And an heirless daughter now married to a king. His trap had failed. The Red Wedding had never happened. And worse still, Robb Stark had walked away stronger. A letter arrived from Roose Bolton days later, short, cold. "Moat Catelyn is ours. The neck is sealed. The South belongs to the wolves now." And for the first time since Ned Stark died, the realm began to wonder, what if the North really could win? The fires of war began to creep toward King's Landing, not with banners and trumpets, but through whispers and fear. In the capital, the Lannisters were no longer a fortress of gold and pride. Cersei paced the Red Keep like a lioness cornered, her claws out, her mind unraveling. Her father, Tywin, remained calm, but even he could not ignore what Robb Stark had become. He took Harrenhal, sealed the neck, and married the Frey girl like nothing happened. Tywin growled, stabbing a finger at a map littered with sigils. "He's no longer playing to win battles. He's playing to end our bloodline." Tyrion leaned in, his voice low. "Then perhaps we should stop underestimating the boy. He's not Ned, he's colder." Tywin glared, and colder men are easier to break. But it wasn't Robb who was breaking. It was the South. House Tyrell, once fiercely loyal to the crown through marriage, began to question the stability of the throne. Margaery whispered to her grandmother, Robb Stark could be the future, not Joffrey. The old woman, sharp as ever, replied, "Then perhaps it's time we stop betting on insane children with crossbows." Even the faith of the Seven began shifting subtly. The High Septon delivered sermons about justice, honor, and lost northern kings. It was a small thing barely noticed, but it was the kind of spark that set dry fields ablaze. Meanwhile, in the north, Robb prepared his final strategy. He knew that taking King's Landing would cost lives, maybe even his own. But he also knew that letting the Lannisters rule was letting rot fester in the realm. So, he called his bannermen and laid out a plan that would either make him the king of Westerosi, him buried with a sword in hand. "We march to Riverrun first," he said. "We solidify the Riverlands, break any lingering Lannister loyalists, and then we move down the King's Road straight to the capital," asked Greatjon. Robb shook his head. "No, we make it look like that. But we split the army. I'll take the main force through the King's Road. Seer Edmure will lead a shadow force through the Blackwater Rush, harassing their grain lines. Meanwhile, Roose Bolton will swing south from the neck, burning every supply wagon bound for the capital. We starve them first, we weaken the walls, then we break them." Catelyn, standing beside the map, said softly, "And who do you trust to lead the final siege?" Robb paused, looked at her, then answered, "Me." At Winterfell, Bran dreamed of wolves circling the capital. He saw a throne of swords melting under the weight of snow and fire. He woke with tears on his face and whispered, "It's coming." In the east, Daenerys Targaryen heard tales of the young wolf who refused to die. "The North remembers," her advisors said. "And now the South fears." She smiled faintly, but her eyes were wary. "Then perhaps the game is more crowded than I thought." Back at Riverrun, Robb reunited with his uncle Edmure, the Tully forces swelling under his command, with Rosalind by his side, dutiful and kind. If quiet Robb presented the image of a king fully committed to the realm, not his heart, his men respected him more for it. And Catelyn, though mourning Talisa in her own quiet way, saw the iron spine growing in her son. "He's becoming something more," she whispered to Seer Brynden, the blackfish. "He's no longer a boy. He's the king my husband would have feared and admired." But not all eyes saw Robb's rise with pride. Roose Bolton watched from the shadows, his pale face unreadable. The letter from the Lannisters still burned in his possession, offer of Warden of the North in exchange for betrayal. But the Red Wedding had never happened. The trust hadn't been broken. Robb had given him power, territory, and gold. Still, betrayal never needed a reason, only an opportunity. And Roose knew those would come. Far to the south, Joffrey screamed at his mother, hurling goblets and threats. "He's a dog, a filthy wolf. I want his head on a spike." Cersei said nothing. She just stared out the window, watching the clouds roll in. For the first time, even she didn't know if her son would still sit the Iron Throne by the end of the year. Because Robb Stark was coming, and this time he wasn't bringing honor. He was bringing war. Smoke rose in the distance, black columns that curled into the grey skies, marking where the Lannisters had once stood tall. Robb Stark stood on a hill, overlooking the scorched remains of a Lannister caravan. Broken sigils, shattered wagons, and the scent of burned grain painted a vivid picture. The southern lords had thought him a northern fool, but he had cut off their food. Their gold couldn't feed their soldiers, and King's Landing was beginning to feel the hunger. He turned to Lord Karstark, his voice quiet but firm. "Burn. 5 more on the way to Duskendale. No survivors, no supplies, no mercy." Karstark grunted in approval. "They won't forget your name after this. They will remember Winterfell," Robb corrected, "and what it means when wolves are starved." But not all wolves were loyal. Roose Bolton rode alone at night, quiet as a shadow, slipping away from the encampment under the guise of reconnaissance. He met no Freys this time, no bloody toasts, no musicians with hidden blades, but his heart still twisted with the weight of missed opportunities. The Red Wedding was supposed to be his rise. Now it was only a ghost. In his saddlebags, he carried Tywin's offer, still valid, still tempting. Warden of the North, with free rule and a Lannister bride for his bastard, Ramsay. But for the first time, Roose hesitated. Robb had trusted him, given him land, title, command, and more dangerously Still, as the cold winds of war howled across the riverlands, the hunger in Roose's soul remained. A man like him never followed forever. He only waited. At King's Landing, the cracks were spreading. The black water had grown silent, but inside, the Red Keep, screams echoed nightly. The small folk rioted in Flea Bottom, and bread cost more than meat. The gold cloaks beat them back, but not with order only, with fear. Joffrey sat on his throne like a petulant god, demanding heads. "Find the Stark boy's wife," he shouted one day. "If he has one, I want her. I'll hang her from the battlements." Cersei only drank. Tyrion, now master of coin again, met with Varys in the darkened halls. "The boy king is cracking," Tyrion muttered. "He throws tantrums while wolves chew at our gates." Varys gave a knowing look, and, "What do clever lions do when the forest grows too loud?" "Either make peace," Tyrion said, "or set the whole forest on fire." "And which one are you?" the spider asked softly. Tyrion didn't answer. Outside the walls of the capital, Robb Stark's army drew closer, but not with haste. He was choking them, not charging. Every night, fires burned near the horizon, that the wolves were near, but just out of reach. Then came the unexpected. A raven arrived from dawn. Prince Doran Martell's seal glinted in the torchlight as Robb broke it open. The message was short, but clear. The lion killed my sister. If the wolf will strike true, Dawn will stand beside him. Doran Martell. Robb handed the note to Catelyn without a word. Her eyes scanned it, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled, though faintly. Then we are not alone. At the same time, the veil stirred. Petyr Baelish had been quiet, manipulating from afar. But Sansa Stark's position in the capital, combined with the growing strength of her brother, made her value rise like smoke from a pyre. Baelish whispered into Lysa, Arryn's ear, promises, threats, and when she finally agreed to open the Ares gates and march soldiers to the Trident, he smiled. The game is changing, he whispered to himself, and I always win when the board shifts. As spring crept slowly over Westeros, the wolves were at the door, the lions were cornered, and the game had grown sharp. Robb Stark stood before his men one cold morning near Maidenpool. Snowflakes drifted down, soft but steady, even this far south. He turned to his bannermen, Karstaki, Morhamon, Tully, and raised his sword. Today, he said, we stop pretending. This is a war for justice. We stop pretending we're here for revenge. We are here to take the throne, to end the game, for good. The men roared, steel striking shields, and far away, in the Red Keep, Cersei dropped her goblet, her hands shaking. Because for the first time since Robert's rebellion, she felt it. The fall was coming. Snow fell on the fields outside King's Landing. It shouldn't have, not this far south, not this early in the year, but it did. Small flakes, quiet and constant, like the North had come to remind the realm of what it had forgotten. Robb Stark stood with grey wind at his side, eyes fixed on the capital's distant walls. The Red Keep loomed like a wound against the horizon, and beneath it, the city writhed in misery. Fires burned in Flea Bottom. The bells tolled not for victory, but for death, famine, plague, unrest. It was time, but the war would not be won with only steel. Robb knew that, and so he sent one last raven to King's Landing, bearing no threats, no insults. Just a message. Surrender, and I will let the boy king live. Resist, and I will feed your city to the wolves. Inside the Red Keep, Joffrey laughed when he read it. I want his head. I want his mother's heart ripped out and nailed to my throne. Tyrion rubbed his temples. You've already lost half your bannermen, Joffrey. If Robb Stark wants your crown, all you've got to throw at him are words and Lannister gold. And people can't eat gold. Cersei stared at the raven's feather, her lips pressed tight. He thinks we'll fold because he's cold and clever, but I've outlasted worse than wolves. Tyrion gave her a dry look. Have you? Meanwhile, in the Vale, Littlefinger's games bore fruit. Lysa, Arryn, unstable but eager to impress her new husband, agreed to march her troops, but only to the Riverlands. Petyr didn't care. He didn't need them at King's Landing. He needed the world to know he had armies now, that when the dust settled, the Vale would have a stake in the ashes. And in the north, something darker stirred. Ramsay Snow, the bastard of Bolton, sacked Deepwood Motte and razed villages left undefended. Roose Bolton had not ordered it, but he had not stopped it either. The old alliances frayed like old banners in the wind. Catelyn heard the news from a scout. Her face went pale. "Roos's bastard moves without leash," she whispered. "He's testing our limits." Robb read the message, silent for a long time. "Then we pull Bolton back, replace his command with Lord Glover, and if Roos doesn't return," he didn't finish the sentence. But Grey Wind growled softly at the mention of Roos's name. Then came the tipping point. Riverrun was betrayed. Not by force, not by siege, but from within. Edmure Tully, taken in by promises of peace from King's Landing, opened the gates to a Lannister envoy. What he didn't know was that among them was Seer Meryn Trant, wearing red and gold but bearing steel under his cloak. They slit the throats of the guards at the gate, let in a dozen more, and by dawn the Tully castle flew the Lion's banner once again. The message reached Robb just 2 days later. Catelyn crumpled the scroll in her hand. My brother trusted them. Robb's fury was unlike anything his men had seen. He didn't scream, he didn't rage. He simply said, "We end it now." At nightfall, Robb sent the final command. The army would split again. Half would march around the Black Water, flanking the capital from the southern coast. The rest would prepare siege engines. No more waiting. No more slow strangulation. They would strike before spring, before the city could rally. "Your Grace," Lord Karstark asked, "if we take the Red Keep, what do we do with the Lannisters?" Robb didn't blink. "The boy dies. The mother too, and Tyrion." That gave him pause. "We'll see." Far beneath the Red Keep, in the tunnels where Varys walked like a ghost, the spider listened to the cracks forming. He watched the fires burning far off on the hilltops. He smelled war in the air and change. And that night, for the first time in years, he lit a secret flame and sent a message not to the east, not to Dawn, but to Winterfell, to Jon Snow, because he had heard whispers that the bastard brother of the young wolf now stood at the wall, a commander, a man with loyalty, still buried deep in Stark bones. "The realm will fall," Varys said softly, sealing the letter, "and the wolves will feast, but some part of it must still be saved." And as the first siege tower rose on the hills outside the capital, the sun broke through the clouds, just long enough to shine on the wolf banners flapping in the wind. Dawn came with fire. The skies above King's Landing turned grey with smoke as Robb Stark's siege engines hurled stone after stone against the outer walls. The capital, bloated and bitter from war, shook under the thunder of war drums. Its people, once arrogant and cruel, now huddled behind broken gates, praying to gods that had long stopped listening. Outside, the banners of the north, the Riverlands, and now Dawn flew high. The Martells had arrived late, but not too late with spears and fire in their hearts. The southern sun had finally risen behind the north's cold vengeance. From the ramparts, Tyrion Lannister watched the army stretch out like a tidal wave of steel and fur. His wine trembled in the cup. "They're really here," he muttered to Bronn, "and they're not playing anymore." Bronn spat over the side. "That's not a war host. That's a reckoning." In the Red Keep, chaos reigned. Cersei had barricaded herself in the throne room, with Joffrey pacing like a rabid dog. "We'll burn them," he screeched. "Tell the alchemists too. Ready the wildfire." "They already are," she said coldly. "But it won't be enough. You said they'd never get this far." "I said we'd outlast them," she snapped. "And we might have, if you hadn't murdered half the small folk for sport." In the silence that followed, Joffrey's face twisted. For the first time, fear began to creep into his voice. What do we do? Cersei didn't answer. She looked toward the Iron Throne. Her fingers twitched, and she thought, for just a moment, about killing her son herself. Just to end the madness. Just to die before Robb Stark could claim them. But fate had other plans. At mid-morning, the gates burst open not from siege, but from betrayal. Tyrion had done what Tyrion did best. He opened the gates from within. "I'm not dying for a throne built on lies," he told Bronn. "And I'm certainly not dying for that boy." He arranged for the guards to stand down, for the city gates to be opened on a signal 3 longhorn blasts. And when the gates did swing open, Robb Stark rode through them not as a conqueror, but as justice incarnate. Grey wind snarled beside him. The Northmen screamed like thunder. Dawn struck from the south like fire through parchment, and the Lannister hold shattered. Joffrey tried to run. He made it as far as the tower stairs before Arya Stark stepped out of the shadows. Her face was dirtied, her hair chopped short, but her blade needle was sharp and steady. "You killed my father," she whispered. "No, I didn't. I'm the king." She didn't care. She drove the blade through his throat. He died, choking, face twisted in panic, hands clawing at the air. No soldiers came to help him. No one mourned. Cersei was dragged from the throne room by Dorne's men, screaming curses, trying to claw at her captors. Robb didn't flinch when they brought her before him. She stared at him with eyes full of hatred. "You're your father's son," she spat. Robb's voice was ice. "No, he believed in honor. I believed in victory." And with one nod, he gave the order. Cersei Lannister was executed at the foot of the Iron Throne. When it was done, Robb Stark walked into the throne room, sword still bloody, grey wind. Close behind him, the nobles knelt. The small folk watched from the broken windows. Dawn stood silent. The Vale, still watching from the east, waited. And Robb stared at the throne. He didn't sit. He turned to the room and said, "The war is over. The realm is broken. And there will be no king." Gasps rippled through the hall. "I came to avenge my father, to protect my people. I have done both. The North will never bow again. The South may do as it pleases." He walked away from the throne that had killed so many. And in that moment, the game changed. Winterfell was rebuilt, brick by brick. Catelyn lived to see her son return. Sansa came home with quiet strength in her eyes. Arya did not stay long to much blood in her veins, but she kissed her mother's hand before she rode. Bran ruled the north from the shadows, his visions growing strange and distant, and Jon Snow called home from the wall found peace he never thought he'd deserve. Robb Stark never took a crown, but the people called him king anyway, not because he ruled them, but because he saved them. And far away, in the ruins of a throne room that once held the world in its grip, vines crept through broken stone. The Iron Throne rusted in silence, and the realm, at last, was free.